know about making money. I was out here just having fun. And and the money was just secondary.
Welcome. My name is Doug Simcox, and this is Beyond the Chutes as presented by ParaSight Systems. In this episode, I interview Mike Swearingen, a cowboy from upstate New York who began his professional rodeo career in the mid-'70s. Many rodeo athletes will focus on one event and become specialized in that event. The very few will compete in 2 events, possibly 3 events. Any rodeo athlete that competes in 2 or more events that wins money in those events is in the all-around points race, and winning the all-around cowboy championship is one of rodeo's highest achievements. What's made Mike unusual is that he has competed in 4 events at both ends of the arena. At the bucking chutes, the rough stock riding, the bareback bronc riding, the saddle bronc riding, and the bull riding. And at the other end of the arena, at the timed event end, the steer wrestling. Now, during our conversation, we discuss how he got started in rodeo, and he takes us through 1978, the year that he won his first 3 championships in the American Professional Rodeo Association, one of which was his first all-around cowboy championship. Now, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Search for Beyond the Chutes and follow us. I hope that you enjoy this episode about the all-around cowboy, Mike Swearingen. So, Mike, on this evening, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Doug. How about you?
I am good. I'm excited about this conversation. You know, last time we got together, you talked about Buffalo Bill, the Bounty Bull, Utica, New York, $1,000 bounty, and also riding the yak in Canada. Both those episodes are up. So I'm excited to pick it up. So what I'd like to do tonight, if it's okay, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the early years, okay? Growing up, Mike Swearingen in Nunde, Leicester, New York, was it?
Well, I grew up, up until, we lived in Lima up until the 5th grade.
Okay.
Then we moved to Leicester. Dad bought a farm up there and moved to Leicester. And in Lima, I was more of a town kid, but Dad had a couple horses, but that's pretty much all I remember much about that until we moved to Leicester.
Okay.
We went from there, but yep, and then that's where pretty much all started.
So in Leicester, a little bitty town, upstate New York, south and west of Rochester, is that how you would describe it, upstate?
Yep.
So you move in the 5th grade. You moved to Leicester. Had you seen rodeo? Was it already on your radar by the 5th grade?
Well, yeah, Dad used to take us to a lot of the rodeos that were around, the few that were around, and Dad actually played around doing a little roping. He never really entered, I don't think, too many rodeos except for barrel racing. Now, back then, the men could barrel race, and Dad had a stud that he was kind of promoting a little bit, and he was breeding a few mares and stuff with it, but he would run barrels and he would rope off this stud, and so that's kind of where I kind of remember some of that. And he actually even ran even back then they called them they go to these fairgrounds and have rodeos, and even at the fairs, and they'd have these flat races, quarter horse races on the tracks, and Dad had entered the stud a few times. So I remember going to some of the rodeos back then, just watching and kind of. So I did have a little bit of knowledge of what they did, and bull riding scared me to death. But
Okay. Yeah. So was it very organized then? I mean, we're talking what, mid to late 60s, mid 60s?
It was been late 50s, early 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And ERA at that point, the Empire Rodeo Association?
I don't know. I don't even think it was organized at that time yet. I mean, there were some little bit later on that I know were, like Lima. A couple guys got together and built an arena, and then he started putting rodeos on. I think that's pretty much That was one of the ones that was an actual organized Empire Rodeo Association rodeo, and then there were more after that. But that was one of the first ones I kind of remember because we were still living in Lima, and that was not too far away, so we'd go to that and watch that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Attica was going on at that time.
Yes, but I don't remember going to Attica until after we had moved to Leicester and was up there for a while.
Okay.
Yep.
So you move in the 5th grade, and that's when now you're more exposed to rodeo? You get an opportunity?
We're more exposed to riding horses.
Okay.
We had a riding stable. Dad and Mom started a riding stable. Geneseo State College wasn't but about 5 or 6 miles from us. And so back in the early 60s and mid 60s, they started riding stables. And my job was to break all the new horses or at least ride them. Dad would go to auctions every week. And at one time we had about 80 head of trail horses.
Holy cow.
And they'd get sour and we'd turn them over. So I would wind up being the oldest. I would be the test pilot, and I would have to make sure that they were safe for the public.
Yeah.
Well, when they come from the auctions, there's a hole in them from somewhere, you know.
Right.
And so the roughness and that part of it was just pretty much how I got started. It wasn't a competition or anything. I just have to get on these old crow baits and make sure that they were safe and some would work out, some wouldn't. If they didn't work out, they would back to the sale barn the next week and, he'd replace them with something else. So that's pretty much how we got as far as my horsemanship and knowing horses. But even way back when I lived in Lima, I guess I could go back a little bit. Dad and another good family friend, Dave Montier, like I said, would play around roping and stuff. Well, Dad had bought me a little blind Shetland stud pony, and we would buck him. We'd just put a rope around his girth. That's all I used for, and he'd put a flank on him, and pony stand there, and I'd get on him, and then he'd give him a kick start, and away we'd go. We'd buck around there, and then he bought me a little bull, had a little bucking bull. So I guess back in the 5th grade, if I stop and think about it, I was doing that kind of stuff, but we were just playing around having fun,
And was it fun? I mean, did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, so by the time we did get to the horses and, and had all the horses and doing a lot of riding, and riding every day and stuff.
Yeah.
That just built my balance and the knowledge and the movement of horses and things like that. So that's where the education came from as far as that part of it.
Okay. And no doubt some of these horses coming out of the auction a little bronky?
Yeah. Most of them weren't too bad. Most of them were spoiled. They either barn sour or, or they, but he did buy one horse that Dad comes home with him, and good looking, registered a Poco Bino horse, and good looking, stout son of a gun. Well, Dad says, well, I had to buy him. He's going too cheap. He says, I've seen him go through the auction 5 weeks in a row. He keeps coming back.
Oh my. But you can break him, Mike. You'll be all right.
So he says, yeah, get him saddled. So I threw the saddle on him, and I crawl up on him now. And I don't know why on earth he did this, but we had arena right there, but no, we got to saddle the son of a gun out in the driveway, and get up on him. I said, well, we'll take him. He's all right. Well, Dad had put a lariat. He had a halter and bridle on him, and he put a lariat around his neck and run it down through the halter so he'd have a little bit of control with him.
Yeah.
My dad was like I don't know. He was like on the end of a kite string getting this son of a gun broke in too. About time I hit my butt in that seat, he exploded. And he bucks down through there, and he's just a clacking them. And I hang on to him. Dad's on the end of the lariat, he's sliding along. And you got to understand, my dad probably only weighed 145 pounds. At that time, he was in good shape, but he wasn't a very big man.
Right.
And so the horse stops, and it gets kind of towards the end of the driveway, going away from the road, which was good. He stops over kind of towards the arena.
Yeah.
And today I remember watching this horse's eyes, and he turned and looked at one foot, and he turns head and looked at the other foot, and he says, "This son of a gun's still in the middle of me." Turns around and breaks in two, going back the other way, almost up to the road. And I mean, he's clacking him over his head. Wow. He doesn't got me on the ground yet. I mean, he's got me pretty shook up, but I mean, so Dad's still on there, and he quits bucking.
Mm.
I kind of ride the horse, finally he stops, and Dad said, "Well, kick him up again, see what happens." Well, he didn't do anything. He just started to walk off.
Okay.
And walked him up, whoa, back, this son of a gun's broke.
Okay.
He's broke.
Okay.
He come out of Nebraska. He was a ranch horse to come out of Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
So he'd made his way back east here.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Dad walks up and he peels the lariat off. I said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
It's, he's all right. He's broke. So I walk him off, stop him, back him, turn him, neck reign's good. He is broke. I mean, he was broke son of a gun.
Yeah.
So I start jogging him around a little bit. Yeah. Stop him, back him up, turn him. Yeah. Okay. Jog him off there again. I break him in the lope. This son of a gun unloads me now. Wow. I mean, he explodes, dumps me in a pile.
Yeah.
And he's bronky anyway. I mean, just his natural demeanor, he was bronky. But we get him caught up. I get him. Now I take him in the arena.
Yeah.
And I ride him around. And I find out a lot about the horse. I find that, his mental. He just loved to buck.
Okay.
And you had to ride that son of a gun. You could saddle him up, get on him, and walk off, and ride him around and trot him off if you rode him pretty much every day or 3 or 4 times a week or whatever. And he wouldn't buck until you broke him into a lope.
Okay.
He'd have to buck.
He'd have to buck. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So this become a practice horse? I mean, it sounds like you're headed into bronc riding.
Well. And that's a funny thing to say that, because about that time, Dad started putting on Little Britches rodeos. We put on the first Little Britches rodeos east of the Mississippi, right there in our backyard.
Oh wow!
And we put on 2 of them there at home, and then I think Dad, in 2 years' time, we had like 5 of them, because he went to a couple different towns and put some on, and it was most of them were horses that we had that were a little bit sour. Mm-hmm. Trail horses or something that Dad started putting a little bit of, and he was in there, he was one of them. And actually the very first broken bone I ever got, I drew the horse in the bareback riding up at a rodeo, and they'd had the chute gates. Nobody knew anything about whoever was putting the rodeo on up. It was up towards Rochester, up by the lake up there. And, they had put this high school rodeo on, Little Britches rodeo, and they hung the chute gates on backwards.
So
the horse was facing the latch. And by the time they got up there, we didn't realize any of this, and you couldn't load them in from the other way. So we would make sure that most of them, this horse was so fast leaving the chutes. Yeah. When I drew him in the bareback ride, and then when he come out, he hit my toes on the post. And I broke my foot, and I won the bareback riding on him, but I didn't even know. I mean, I knew something happened, but I won the bareback riding on the horse and went to get off on the pickup man. Dad was a pickup man, and I got off on him, and I couldn't put my foot on the ground. I said, "Dad, something's wrong. I can't step on it." Yeah. So he kind of carried me off to, I hung on the saddle horn, carried me off the fence, and got up there, and then I was done. I totally busted my foot. So, but that was, but So the horse was actually, and then when it got said and done, I sold a horse to a stock contractor up in Canada.
Oh, wow.
As a
You
barrel
did.
horse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, but did you ever see the horse again? Did you ever get on the horse?
No.
Canada?
No. Once he got up there, I never did see him again.
Okay.
I didn't really start going. At that time, I was only like, I think 14 or so.
14.
14 or 15.
So with the Little Britches Rodeo, what events were you competing in then? Do you recall?
Bareback and bull riding.
Just bareback and bull riding.
Right, because basically, I roped. I don't know, and that was a funny thing because that's what Dad wanted us boys to be, were ropers to start with.
Okay.
And we were too wild. I always figured I was a wild Indian. I really did. It was just like that kind of stuff, just screwing around with it. And, but no, I don't remember roping. I never really enjoyed it too much.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Did rope and could rope quite a bit, but it's, it was just like going to a horse show. We did a lot of horse showing back in those years too. We go.
Oh, you did.
A lot of gymkhanas and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
So with the horse shows, and I'm seeing a lot of connection between horse shows and rodeos. That's kind of an evolution. So with the rodeo or horse shows, rather, were you doing? There's pleasure classes, equitation, there's halter, then there's the games. What were you doing, if you remember, from horse shows? Well,
in the 4-H horse shows, we did quite a bit. We did the pleasure classes, and not so much the pleasure classes. We do equitation and that type of the trail class and some of that stuff. But when it got to the gymkhanas and the open shows stuff, it was all games. The can races and the egg races, and I mean just all the fun games and stuff. And
you bet. Barrels, poles, all that good. Goat tying, were you ever a goat tire?
Never seen it.
Never did. Okay.
I'd never seen it until we went out to the Little Britches finals. It was the first time I ever seen goat tying.
Okay.
And they just didn't have a lot of stuff back here way back then,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you traveled. When did you travel then with Little Britches? You went to the finals. Where was the finals? What year would that have been, Mike?
Oh, you put me on the spot now.
I am.
I just turned 15, I believe, the first year I made it.
Okay. Early 70s, 1970. I mean, you graduated from high school in 1974, right?
73.
73. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would have been probably in junior high.
Okay.
It was in Littleton, Colorado, just outside of Denver.
Okay.
And made it that first year.
Yeah.
And I went out. There was another boy and his family wanted to take a vacation, and he rode bareback horses from a little town called Birdsville back here, and it's way off in the sticks. So I don't know. I'd never met the kid. He came and he rode bareback horses. I think he wound up second. I think I won the bareback riding at a lot of them. He wound up second, so we both qualified. And his parents took me out. The first year I went out there.
Because that's quite a trip. That's a long ways out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I qualified for the bull ride and the bareback ride. Now here's what I qualified for.
Uh-huh.
And then their rules were, if you qualified for, I don't know, either two events, you could pick up an optional event that you really didn't qualify for.
Okay.
And I entered the saddle bronc ride.
Now, had you been on a saddle bronc prior? Did you own a saddle? Did you own a bronc saddle?
No.
I
had never seen a saddle bronc horse buck before I got there.
Really? Okay.
Saddle bronc riding has got to be easy. It's a saddle,
Right.
And
yeah.
They didn't have bronc riding back here.
Oh, they did.
None of the semi-professionals, the ERA, them boys at that time, didn't even have it. The guys weren't riding. I hadn't even seen a saddle bronc horse go
Oh my goodness.
at that point in time.
Yeah.
And there was a book out there. I can picture the book, and I can't remember the name of it, but I think it had it was basically a hard book, big book with had a lot of pictures in it. It explained, and I think the RCA probably had put it out there. I'm not sure, but it explained all the events of rodeo,
Okay.
the bareback ride and stuff. And I had gotten one of those. I had that book. I probably got it for Christmas or something at one point in time back, and I had gotten that book out, and I had read about the saddle bronc riding.
Okay. You'd read about it. I mean,
yep.
You're reading it out of a book, looking at pictures.
Yeah, it was
No
just
video.
no video, just looking at pictures, and they were mostly drawings, basically drawings of in that book. They weren't even really good photos.
Okay.
So it was a drawing of a horse bucking, and kind of showed the spurring motion and the buck rein and stuff like that, and it explained a little bit. And even in that book back then, the book had said that it was bronc riding was 10 seconds. The bareback riding and bull riding were 8 seconds.
Yeah.
But the bronc riding was supposed as a 10-second ride.
Mm-hmm.
That's how far back that book went. So.
Oh my.
So that was my bronc ride, and I got all kind of read up on it a little bit on the way out. So
you studied
I had
on the
a
way
real
out.
good idea what I was doing.
Okay.
That was on the way out. Yeah. On the way out to Colorado.
Yeah. So you'd never been on a bronc. You'd never seen a bronc go. You'd never seen a saddle, modified, bronc rein, all of that sort of thing. Yep. So you get out there. Do you have at least a while before you got to get on? You can watch others. Do you recall?
I got out there and talked to somebody. There was a man from Kansas out there, from Goodland, Kansas, and I wish I could remember his name. They were wonderful, wonderful people, and he had a pretty good. He might have even been the president of the association at that time. I don't know. He was up there had a lot to do with the Little Britches rodeos anyway. Mm-hmm. And so he made sure he come and talked to us. It met us and got to talking, and, do you need anything, And so I told him, what I was under. He asked, and I told him I didn't have a saddle or anything. Well, we'll get you fixed up. So he starts asking around, has some kids, can you borrow your saddle and stuff? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not very tall.
Okay.
When I'm standing there looking at these, we get a saddle borrowed from some Texan that's about 4 foot taller than I am.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I didn't know anything about adjusting stirrups or anything like that, right. Here's the saddle.
Yeah.
So the very first saddle bronc horse that I seen buck, I was on him.
Are you serious? Okay.
Yes, I'm serious.
Okay. I mean,
I was in the middle of them.
You didn't even know how to set a saddle. You didn't know how to measure your bronc rein. None of that stuff.
No.
Oh my goodness.
And we were going through that, and they actually ran a horse in the chutes for me.
Okay.
Before the rodeo.
Yeah.
And showed me a few things.
Okay.
And then when the show, they started running stuff in there, they had 2 or 3 kids standing around there, and they must have, oh boy, this is going to be a goof killing here. Boy, let's watch this. So I happened to be getting in the saddle.
Yeah.
And the clown and bullfighter were standing down there outside of the chutes, and everybody's helping me because I had no clue.
Yeah.
And they were helping me get the saddle put on and everything. And one of the kids said, here's where you take your buck rein.
Okay.
Well, guess what?
What?
It was about at the back cantle of the saddle.
Oh my goodness.
And the bullfighter, the clown, there was a clown there, and I don't remember his name either. He starts yelling. Yeah. He's yelling at these kids because they're having a blast. They're going to watch this New York cowboy get cow killed here.
Okay.
So he hops up there and he tells me, he says, you kind of run them guys off. He says, listen, here's where you take it. Mm-hmm. Just kind of try to lift and don't pull, and basically that was the quickie. But as as soon as the horse left the chute, you know, I knew I had to try to mark him out, but
Okay.
I threw my feet up there and threw my feet right out of both stirrups because they were about 6 inches longer than
Way
they were
too
supposed to
long.
have been.
Yeah.
Way too long.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I'm going out through there, and the horse is just a nice horse, just jumping and kicking, just loping out, you know, just jumping and kicking, nothing dirty, straight away.
Yeah.
And both stirrups are flopping around, you know, and I'm hanging on there, and I can hear the announcer. Well, and I got to back up just a little bit because my dad didn't want me to get on a bronc.
Yeah.
He had seen a couple guys get hung up and drugged, and he said, oh. So I said, no, I really want to. He said, well, if you're going to, he said, I'm not going to say you can't, but if you're going to, you're going to get a pair of boots that are too big, and you're going to cut them so that they fall off.
Yeah.
Well, I cut them. Well, I had to shuffle my feet around because they'd fall off if I was walking. You know? So anyway, when I lost my stirrups, my boots fell off in the arena, you know, and I go out and I make the ride.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, get off on the pickup, man. I'm running around looking for my boots, and the announcer is just roaring. Well, the New York Cowboy rode his horse, but he can't find his boots out here, you know, and he was having a good time, but I didn't care. You know, it was fun. I mean, it was, you know, so that was my very first saddle bronc. And the second one was fast.
Yeah.
Actually, I think my second horse that I had there, I think the photographer, if I believe right, was James Fame.
Okay.
And I had some of those pictures, and I had a house fire, and I lost a lot of those older pictures. I don't have anymore, but I believe it was James Fame. And he came up to me before I got on his horse. He says, Mike, he says, I know this horse is, I'm going to get a real good picture of you coming out. But I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to go one jump out of the chute, and he's going to hang a hard left. He says, and I'll get you coming out. He says, but after that, he says, you know.
Yeah.
Well, the horse came out one jump, two jumps. I looked, the horse jumped right over top of he hit that cameraman. The camera went flying, flattened him. I can remember looking down at the photographer getting flung to the, run over.
Yeah.
And when I did, that horse made his hard Alaman left, and I landed right on top of the photographer.
Oh my goodness.
So we had a chuckle about that, but that was my initial start of my saddle bronc riding.
So did you borrow chaps? I mean, were you riding in chaps at that time for the barebacks?
I don't even think I had chaps.
Yeah.
At that time, especially bronc chaps. I did have bareback chaps and bull chaps, and I probably had them on. I don't remember,
But probably not worked in with rosin or anything like that.
Heck no. What was rosin? I didn't use it in my bull rope or bareback rigging at that time.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So do you remember that first year? So the finals night, I'm going to say it's 1969 or something, possibly.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. 68, somewhere in there, yeah.
How did you do? Bull riding, bareback riding, how did you do?
I rode both my bareback horses, and I think I missed one of them out.
Okay.
And then I think I rode both my bulls, but they weren't much. And, I remember one of the pictures I did have of the bull, his big black bull, jumped out there and turned back right there. And I held my own as far as the events that I knew.
Sure.
A little bit about.
Sure.
Just a little bit.
So backing up a little bit before you go out there, had you had any kind of formal instruction on bareback riding or bull riding or any of that? I mean, schools or a coach or anything?
No. I had a couple guys back here. Ed Phillips was one of them.
Okay.
Dave Ventier, a family friend that would come over and help.
Okay.
He rode bareback horses a little bit. So the little bit that we did do, it was just like get a little bit of advice here and there.
Yeah.
I never went to a rodeo school until I think I may have been a junior in high school.
Okay.
And by Larry Moriarty come up and help some of it. That was a school where lot of these guys that were around here, Ward Mitchell,
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
those guys kind of got together. Let's do a school. You know, we got some young guys coming up. Let's do a school. And down towards Auburn, guy had an indoor arena. And so and that was the deal where if you entered 3 events, you'd get your 4th for free. And they had a bulldog in school at the same time. So that's where I learned how to bulldog at that school.
Well, who could pass up a free school?
Well, that's it. You know, I entered the bareback ride and the bull riding and the saddle bronc riding and so, well, I'm going to, and I weighed 128 pounds, about that.
Right.
But it was, I learned so much at that school from bulldog, and I learned a little bit. I learned how to pull my bareback rigging by myself and, you know, and things like that. It's a lot of little things, but as far as, you know, my riding techniques and stuff, I don't remember learning much about that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's when you first started steer wrestling? Was that as a junior in high school? That was your first experience with that?
Yep.
Okay. So by this time, you're 17 years old. So you've been on a few saddle broncs by then. Did you have your own saddle?
No. I didn't know. These guys back here, Ward and a guy by the name of Billy Bean, and some of them guys that did ride saddle broncs a little bit. By then, they were always so gracious to loan their stuff and, you know, and try to help. You know, I don't remember when I bought my first bronc saddle that I did buy was an old Hamley that still had the horn on it.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was the very first one. It was an old one, and you know, but that was the first one I bought. And I bought another one after that didn't have the horn on it.
Okay. Now, did you have your own gears? And the bareback bronc riding rigging, was it a hard handle or was it the softer handle that they rode with?
Way back then, they were still soft handle.
They were still soft handle.
Yeah.
So no locking your hand in. It was on grip and that sort of thing.
Grip.
Okay.
Yep. And the only thing that they were doing a little bit at that time was taking tape. It didn't matter if it was black tape or whether it was athletic tape or whatever. You turn it over backwards and go around the handle so that the sticky part was out.
So it's sticky. Okay. So before rosin and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But you had your own bull rope and everything.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Going back to the Little Britches rodeos, did you meet anybody out there that you saw later maybe or broke out big or something like that? Do you recall?
Not that I can. It was so overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
Getting out there with all those kids around, you know, and a lot of them kids could really ride, you know, but they had been riding Little Britches rodeos. They'd been riding high school rodeos, you know.
Okay.
We just didn't have any back here.
Right.
And it just wasn't.
And the difference in stock, right? I mean, a lot better stock out there than what you'd been getting on.
There was some stock that was a lot better, but a lot of the stuff that we had back here that Dad had and stuff was comparable to their long round horses, you know.
Okay, good.
Bulls.
So no real big step up. I guess what I'm trying to, no real big step up to go out there necessarily in the long round.
No, not really. I mean, there certainly were some that were, you know, like that second saddle bronc horse I got on. You know, I mean, he was way over my head.
Right.
And there were some of the bulls and bareback horses that come back in the short rounds were pretty good. They were pretty juicy. I remember watching some of them, but I had never made it back to the short rounds or in any of the events at that time. So.
Okay. Now that was your first episode, Little Britches Rodeo Finals. You went again, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The following year?
Yeah.
Okay. And still in Colorado?
Yep.
Okay. And your events?
Bulls and bears.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I got the bronc riding.
Okay. Still didn't have your own saddle, so still was borrowing gear.
Yep. I still borrowed a saddle. I borrowed a saddle and took it out there with me.
Oh, you did?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So at least it fits you. It had been adjusted.
Yeah.
You'd been in it before, right? You'd been at least on the saddle.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you recall about that finals, your second finals?
Not too awful much. I didn't draw very good. I think they did throw me off one of my bulls.
Okay.
And the bareback riding, I was just, I just drew kind of in the middle of the pen, and it was just an also ran, and that's the way that whole week went for me. And I think that was the year that Sammy went out, and he won Little Britches.
Typical cowboy.
Typical cowboy. Yep. And the trophy was taller than he was, and it was the goat tying that actually got him. He'd won that because of the goat tying, because he just didn't give up the goat. He had a heck of a time. It was funny. The goat was on him, and he was on the goat, and back and forth. And and just the try that he had, the people they admired it,
Okay.
And
Yeah. I didn't know that part, that he won it based on the goat tying.
I think that's what cinched it for him anyway.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Because he was in the bareback ride and the junior bareback ride and the junior bull ride and the goat tying, I believe, at that one.
Not riding broncs at that point. So his third event, your third event was saddle bronc, which was you didn't have to qualify, what I understood. So you could get out there and say, okay, well, I'm here, I'll do goat tying.
I believe so. Yep.
Okay, and that makes sense. So 16 years of age, go out there. What do you do when you get back? Are you starting to ride a little bit more organized rodeo, more going? You're 16 years old. You got your driver's license, right?
Yeah. We started going, and still didn't have very many rodeos to go to around here. We'd go up into Canada a little bit once in a while, and get on up there. And that was probably, there were a few more rodeos up in Ontario than there were down here right at that point. And there were some good ones too, The contractor was good and everything. I got up there a few times. Of course, Attica by then, and we would go to Attica and we'd just crawl on something every performance. We exhibition, whatever we could get on, we were getting on and practicing and learning that way. Attica really helped us a lot. Like I said, there were some other smaller rodeos around Locke, New York, and Lima, New York, but there were some going up that they started putting on. The ERA was really starting to get under a pretty good head of steam. I don't know if you saw some of the pictures I put on early of Athens, PA. So some of those rodeos I would get to, and but they were just kind of getting going. And but going up into Canada, going up in Ontario, and riding up there, was a lot better stock that we were getting on. As far as I would say, for me as a whole, it was different. So it might not have been any better stock. It was just different. I hadn't seen it before, so my mentality was, this is better stuff. And he did have a few good horses up there that were buckers.
Okay. And at this point, barebacks, bull riding, saddle bronc, are you doing steer wrestling also at this point?
Just starting to. I didn't steer wrestle for like a couple years after the school because I was small and didn't think I could, but I started traveling with the guy that taught me, Daryl Lane. Was one of the instructors, and I started traveling with Daryl.
Yeah.
And because he was a bulldogger and he had a good team, well, you got to enter. Well, some of those rodeos now, they're starting the ARA or Delmarva at the early was Delmarva Rodeo Association, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. And they were starting to come up into Pennsylvania a little bit. So we would go down to Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania and started going to some of them with Daryl. And, and that's when I started bulldogging. And some of them steers were just Hereford, little small Hereford steers. And I was quick and a lot of them would go out and set up. I could get off, catch them, and throw them on the ground and win a little bit once in a while. So that's kind of where it took off from. But Daryl was my my inspiration to start entering the bulldogging.
Okay, so a couple things. You're small, right? You're 135 pounds at this point, 140 pounds maybe?
Yeah, I graduated out of high school. My senior year was 145 pounds.
145 pounds. So is this after you graduated from high school, you're traveling with Daryl Lane and getting a little bit further afield?
No, I was still in high school.
Okay,
A little bit. Probably my junior and senior year, I went to a few, not a lot, but when I really started hauling with them was right after I graduated.
Okay, so going back to when you were still in high school and you were traveling a bit with him, smaller, so maybe you're 130 pounds earlier before you graduated. So you didn't have the sheer force and the sheer bulk to steer wrestle. So you had to depend on pretty good technique.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was one thing. It's kind of me and Daryl were like Mutt and Jeff. You know, he's tall, lanky, he had lots of leverage.
Right.
And he had an excellent style of, you know, for back then, you know, of getting off and staying on your feet and, you know, and just really bringing them up over your hip and bringing them around you, you know. So that I learned by learning all that, watching him and being smaller, I had to, you know, I had to really, you know, when I got off, I had to really kind of just get set in the ground hard and just really try to bring them up around my hip and because I didn't have the weight, you know. Of course, there's a lot of them that packed me right off down the arena too.
Sure,
you know? The good ones that handle, you know, I could hold my own.
Yeah. And I got to imagine getting that good at the technique or that basic at the technique, perfection almost, to be able to throw, that had to pay dividends as your career progressed.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit, Daryl Lane had a team, which means he's got a team of horses. He's got a Hazen horse and he's got a dogging horse. Okay. So talk a little bit about mount money. This is a new concept for some of our listeners. So Daryl Lane has a team. You say, yeah, I'll ride one of your horses. Talk a little bit about the mount money then.
Well, the general rule of thumb, if you have a full team, you pay 25% of what you win back to the owner of the horses. If he's only got a steer wrestling horse and you have to get another one, then you get 12.5%, you know, on that.
Okay.
So, but with him having his team there, you know, he, of course, I'd give him a quarter of what I won and go on. But that was fine because, you know, I didn't have to feed him. I didn't have to own a horse for a long time. I didn't own a horse, but then, I think I was probably trying to think. I still had the old Dodge. I was probably a year or two, maybe out of high school. I bought my first bulldogging horse.
Oh, you did?
Off of Barry Rosen.
Okay.
Which was from New York City, Queens, or somewhere down there. Barry and a couple of them guys, he carried this horse around as an old bad horse. He was an older horse. He probably 19, 20 years old, great horse.
Okay.
But he was a bulldog. The horse liked to run.
Okay.
And so I wound up buying him from Barry. I think I gave him $500, and I had him for like 3 years. We run him and won a lot of money on the horse.
Okay.
But I still, because I didn't have a Hazen horse, I still had to pay 12.5%
to somebody to haze for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Daryl hazed for you with his team when you mounted up on his horse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most all the time. Every once in a while, Daryl have somebody else haze. You know, if he was trying to watch certain cattle or something, or watch the line. But 99.9% of the time, Daryl always hazed.
Okay. And how many cowboys in a performance might Daryl put on his dogging horse?
He would mount like 5 or 6 guys.
Okay.
I mean, if he had good enough team and they were in good enough shape that they could handle it.
Yeah. So, and just if I've always been curious about this, I'm willing to pay you mount money, but if I never catch, right, or I never get to the pay window, how long do
Hmm.
you let me be one of those 4 or 5 guys?
It really depends on the cowboy. I
Okay.
think
Okay.
Daryl at that point, you know, you can read somebody if
Hmm.
they're there just to be there to be an extra entry fee for somebody else.
Yeah.
You might get on him once or twice.
Okay. Okay.
But if he sees he got some potential, someday he's going to. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of the guys that are like that. But Ward was like that. Ward had a team, and if you wanted to ride Ward's horse, it didn't matter who you were. If you needed a ride, he'd ride. He'd mount you.
Okay.
You know,
Okay. Hmm.
and so. But a lot of the guys that weren't going to amount to anything
Hmm.
didn't last very long anyway.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Okay. Okay.
so
Okay. Okay. All right. So you bought a horse. That means you start hauling. That had to change the whole traveling experience.
it it did, because I I I bought the trailer, had the truck, and bought the trailer, and my first wife got a horse, so
Okay.
Ann would go with me, and she'd have a barrel horse. So we bought her a barrel horse, and she would go, and she was having fun running barrels, and
Hmm.
so
Okay.
um, yeah, so it was that was the start of my traveling outside of, we didn't go, still hadn't really gone too far. We stayed in New York, Pennsylvania, Ontario, um, anything within, you know, 6, 7 hours mostly,
So pick us back up. You're at the finals at 16 years of age. You're starting to haul a little bit more with Darrell Lane, getting to more rodeos. You've got your ERA card, it sounds like, your ARA or Delmarva back then.
hmm
Um, Already competing in more events. So finishes up through high school. So still going to school.
hmm
Did you have summer jobs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for the neighbor. He was a custom farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked for him. Um, I milked some cows,
Oh,
some
wow.
Sundays for the neighbor up there. Get up 3 in the morning, go
Yep.
milk cows.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
little bit of stuff like that once in a while. But most of the time, I was right there on the farm. We were still had all the horses. Dad was still had the riding horses going, the stables. So we were still doing that. And we wintertime we would give hay rides and sleigh rides and stuff, in the fall and that.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of went year round with a lot of that, and then after once I graduated, it was kind of funny because I was about 16. Dad wanted to put on some milk cows. He thought he
Yeah.
wanted, he'd
Yeah.
come from a farming background. And I told him, I said, Dad, I says, I ain't going to be milking cows.
Yeah.
You do what you want to do. I got other brothers and sisters behind me, but I'm not going to be here.
Right.
I'm going
Right.
to tell you that right now. Well, why? This is good, make good living. I said, yeah, but I says, uh, I want rodeo. I
Yeah.
want to get out of here. I'm going to go.
Okay.
So
So what
that
was
kind
your
of cooled that.
kind of cooled that? So no milk
Yeah,
cows. You're
no
not
milk
milking
cows.
cows, and it takes
Had
us.
milk one by hand once in a while. He'd go buy a milk cow just so that we would have milk. I mean, we went through a lot of milk stuff. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but no dairy.
Okay. No dairy. No parlor. No none of that.
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So what was the bust out year? Was it the year you graduated from high school where you said time to go?
Not really,
Okay.
because I still really didn't know what rodeo and the road and everything was all about.
Oh, you
I
didn't. Okay.
really didn't. I mean, we'd go here and there, but I might go to, through my high school years till I got out. I only probably went to 7 or 8 rodeos in a year.
Oh, that's so. Oh, okay.
That
Okay.
few,
Okay. Yeah.
And then once I got out of high school and kind of started to go,
Yeah.
mostly you'd go to Attica, and you'd,
Mhm.
like I said, you'd get on everything you could get on there, and you'd go somewhere else. And then we started entering some rodeos and going to Ohio and starting to spread out a little bit more and looking at it. And I think I was probably, I think what really, really tripped my want to go is I got my IPRA card, well, IRA back then. I got my IRA card. I think I must have been a senior in high school.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Gary's, my very first IRA rodeo was in Annapolis, Maryland, and that was in April. And we're still in the snowbanks up here. Well, Gary Sikoria was bareback rider and steer wrestler up here, and he kind of helped get me going. He took me to my first IRA rodeo.
Okay.
We went to Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay.
And I get down there. The trees are blossomed out. It's warm. It's just, you
Yeah.
get down there and
Yeah.
get on the horse. And I don't know nothing about, anybody else, just to me, my eyes are big. College girls are there and they're liking cowboys, and I'm getting all pumped up. Holy smokes, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I get on a horse that I don't know if he had been ridden up to that point. Nobody had said nothing to me about him. His name was Oh No Crazy Horse. And Triple K Rodeo Company out of Maryland had him, Kenny Brown. And
Okay.
I remember, I nodded my head, and the next thing, horse went out there 2 or 3, and the next thing I'm reared back, and I'm looking, and I see everybody in the bucket chutes behind me. This is in the middle of, this is night rodeo, so the lighting was, the horse had reared up, and he was straight up and down. I'm looking, and he landed on his feet, and I win the rodeo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just my very first IRA rodeo, and I won it.
Yeah.
And so we get, of course, that really pumped me up.
Welcome to the big leagues.
Yeah. Don't even know if I entered the bull riding, to be honest with you. I and probably didn't.
Okay.
Because I really didn't know, going, to me, that was big time going, going out of state, and down there. And, but no, I won the bareback riding, and it got lost in the IRA office out in Oklahoma for some reason. I finally get a check in the mail in November. They were went through their audited books, and they found it. It was lost and never sent it to me.
Oh, wow.
Well, I didn't know how it worked. I'd either, been there to get paid on some of these little rodeos around here, or somebody picked my money up or something.
Yeah.
I said, man, what do we have to do? Wait till the end of the year to get your money? And I was getting ready to call them. I got to thinking about that, and well, then the check comes in the mail, and they had a nice letter saying they apologized. They couldn't believe it. They found it. And so anyway, that was my experience to start with going that way. And then I think that winter, my other buddy that rode bareback horses, Dave Montier, took me to Roanoke, Virginia. And it was a building rodeo, and I believe it was a Longhorn rodeo. I believe it was Loretta Lynn Longhorn rodeo. And I entered that one down there. I don't think I did anything down there at all, but so that was, that was a kind of the kickoff. And I said, oh boy, I guess I can hold my own if I get out here and get going a little bit. And it was still a while before I really, really got excited and decided to crack the nut and go ahead and go hard,
Okay. So talk a little bit about, you call them building rodeos, and that means they're in the buildings, they're in the coliseums or whatever, the big arenas, and they're in the winter, and not a lot of rodeos going on in the winter. So do you remember the caliber of cowboys, cowgirls, the rodeo athletes that were showing up for these rodeos?
Oh, yeah. If they could put their boots on, and they were there.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that was anybody was there, because, like you said, the same thing, the guys from Oklahoma and up in Montana and, all over, they were going to them. Of course, them Longhorn rodeos, they had quite a bit of money added to them to get the guys there. So that was another real eye opener for, little snot-nosed kid that really didn't know a heck of a lot what he was doing at that point in time, but he was just going and having fun and learning, meeting people, and and really finding out that a lot of the guys out there were willing to help, and willing to give you advice.
Okay, excellent. And just bareback still at this point, Mike, at Roanoke?
I think I got on board. I don't remember if I got in the bronc ride or not. I probably did, being that dumb. But
okay.
But it was the whole thing. Like at Attica, when I told my dad, I'm going to go rodeo, and well, what are you going to do? He said, you can't compete against guys like Ward Mitchell and and Darrell Lane and them. And I said, well, so I went to Attica, and what really the snake that bit me was, at that time, I think you almost had to ride every performance. There was at least 3 goals. And, so even though the bronc riding was my worst event, that was one of the first ones that I really made money in. And this was before I went, started going back when I was about 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
And so I had placed in the saddle bronc riding.
Okay.
Because they didn't throw me off. It wasn't very good rides, but I marked them out, and they didn't get me on the ground.
I see.
And so I won some money in the average. I think I won $140 at one time. I went back, man, look at here, Dad. Look what I did.
Yeah.
And that was the snake that bit me. And then from there, I was able to, pick up and start going and making more of a career out of it after I found out that I really could, because 8 seconds, $140 in 8 seconds. Of course, it wasn't just 8 seconds, but to me, I didn't have to work for it, really hard. I had fun making money.
There you go. Now, one of the things I want to talk about this, working 3 events, ultimately working 4 events, you're paying, if you're working 3 events, you're paying 3 entry fees. And I don't want to lose that with our listeners. You're putting up 3 times the money. You got 3 opportunities to ride, 3 different events. So more money possibly on the winning side. And I'm taking you back to Roanoke, Virginia, and those early years. Did that ever bite you? I just paid 3 entry fees, only won money in 1, or something like that?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. If you had a bad weekend, you had a bad weekend, because, it's pretty much, you took everything that you did make during the week doing something and just blew it.
Yeah.
And, and that happened. I mean, that happened off and on my whole career.
Yeah. Okay.
You either had pockets full of money and, and I just, Jimmy Meyer's a super friend of mine, and I remember, talking to Jimmy back. He was a good mentor, and just he really pushed me. But I remember him telling somebody the reason he rode and rodeoed is because of the money. And I got to thinking, I said, that's not why I rodeoed. I didn't know about making money. I was out here just having fun. And that's and the money was just secondary. And I think I kind of lived that way, because if I did real good, and the rule of thumb in my truck was, when I started hauling a bunch of these young guys, is whoever won was going to buy supper for everybody.
Okay, yeah.
I spent a lot of money on food, and and I threw a lot of it away that I could have stuck somewhere else. But that's just the way I was. I wasn't. I just enjoyed it.
Yeah. And that's interesting, and we're going to talk more about this in another episode. I love the mental aspect of rodeo, okay? And you're alluding to that. What is my motivation for wanting to compete? And for Jimmy Myers, it sounds like it was money, and for you, it was you just simply enjoyed it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, to start with, and then, of course, when you start winning money, then, that's there. That's why you're out there, because now it's not just you've grown up enough. It's not just fun and games in high school, and you're out there on the road to make a living, and I've got a family to support, later on, as it got going. So it did become the money, but the love of the sport never left.
All the way through.
And
all the way through.
There got some ups and downs,
Yeah,
and there was a couple times I tried to quit riding bulls, and I just had a bad streak, and I said, you know what, I can't keep going to these and giving my money away. I'm going to quit. So I quit for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I get back in it and win a little bit.
Okay.
Here we go again.
Yeah, yeah. So backing up, what would you consider your rookie year? Your first rookie year? Breaking out in the IRA hard, you're riding APRA. Possibly by this time, it's moved from the Delmarva to the ARA. Let's say, what was the breakout rookie year?
It would have been 1978.
4 years or 3 years, 5 years after you graduate from high school.
Yep.
Okay.
That was really the lights came on. I really, buddy of mine, Joe Farley, that I traveled with him, and Vern Edwards and some guys, that we were traveling up here, and Joe would go. He told me, well, Joe, back when we were kids and still in high school and stuff, he said, you need to go to more than one rodeo, because back when you went to Attica, you just went to Attica. He says, I said, well, why would I do that? He said, it's going to cost me quite a bit more to go. He said, yeah, you can win more. The more rodeos you enter. Yeah. And that's when the lights clicked on about starting to do some traveling. But then the part that I kind of got, Joe went to Florida a couple times. He was talking about the rodeos down there. And I said, you know what? In 78, my daughter Sarah was born in May. The house burnt down that May, or that April, I think. We lost March or April. We had lost the house. I had just bought a brand new truck, so I had a brand new pickup. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go to Florida and see what it's like down there. Okay. So I loaded up and went down in November. No, I got to back up. That's a lie. I went. Me and Joe and Vern went down to a rodeo down in Palatka, Florida, and I went down there and I did really good. I had a good weekend, and the stock contractor Dave Morgan come up, and they were. You get talking to Joe and some of them guys and say, hey, he's kind of a rough course son of a gun, you don't really like a lot of guys, Yankees and stuff, but I'll tell you what, that man after the rodeo, I never said a word to him. I come up after the rodeo, and he mounted me in the Bulldog, and even, I asked him to get mounted. Yeah. So, but after the rodeo, he come up and introduced himself and shook my hand and told me he was glad to see me, and asked me if I was going to come back and see him again. I said, well, I think I probably will. Okay. And that November, I went back down, and they had a Longhorn rodeo. I went to that, and that's when I really got to know David a little bit better. Okay. And then from there, I went down and just started went to Florida, and we moved down there that winter and spent the winter, me and my wife and daughter, and started there. So I would say that probably was my real rookie year as far as my professional career went. Okay. So 1978, what finals did you qualify for? The ARA finals back up here, of course. Okay. So you weren't going hard yet, IPRA or IRA. I went to a few, those were IRA, FCA rodeos down there. We've been going to some. Diamond Rodeo he had all the IRA rodeos. Bob put on a bunch of IRA rodeos back in Virginia and West Virginia, big time. So that part of the IRA, I was going to. Okay. Back here, but that was they're right close to home. Okay. So you still weren't driving. I know you went to Florida and you did that during the winter, but you still weren't driving or traveling very far afield. You were staying in the Northeast for the most part. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Well, the next time we get together, we're going to pick up right from here. I like the rookie year, 1978, when the lights came on. I like that.
And we're going to pick up from there, Mike, and we'll keep stepping forward through your career if that's okay.
Cool. Yeah, you bet.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it here tonight, and this has been interesting. I am learning so much. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. In our next episode, we will pick up with Mike where we left off, starting in 1979. Now, I've added some links for my research in the notes for your review. And to make your listening easier, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Search for Beyond the Chutes and follow us. Remember, check out the New York State Rodeo Museum Facebook group page and become a member. And thank you to ParaSight Systems for their support with our podcast. ParaSight Systems is a push-button parasitic diagnostic system for pasture animals, horses, cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens, and for companion animals, dogs and cats. And you can find them at ParaSightSystems.com. Now, this is Beyond the Chutes. Until next time, this is Doug Simcox. Thank you for listening.